right. Welcome to this episode of the MonkCast, recording here at the lovely Academy of Medicine in Atlanta, Georgia. We are here for DevOps Days 2025 Atlanta, and I am excited to welcome Andrew Clay Shafer, one of the founders of DevOps. He is a principal at Ergonautic. Andrew, thanks for coming on the MonkCast.
Thanks for having me. As I like to say, I didn't create DevOps. I stole it. I stole it from my friends.
Oh, amazing. Okay. Of which you have many, I've come to understand.
I try.
Yeah. Great. Okay. So are you counting at this point? How many DevOps days have you attended?
Oh, I lost count.
All of them?
A long time ago.
Yeah.
Since 2009-ish.
Okay. Amazing. All right. Well, this is my first, and it's going well. So it's an unmitigated success.
But wait, DevOps is dead, so.
Absolutely. All right. So, Andrew, this particular DevOps Days has a little bit of a special theme, which is roasting John Willis. How do you feel like the love fest for John is going so far?
I always loved John, so It's going good.
It's going good. Okay.
I think it was all fun and good-natured.
Yeah, good-natured. Okay. Fantastic. All right. John seems to be taking it in stride. I've seen him cracking a few grins, in fact. I mean, he seems to be...
He got a few belly laughs out of it.
Amazing. I mean, who wouldn't love the attention, right?
Humans like that,
Humans
usually.
like that. Yeah, and we've learned that maybe some of the Europeans aren't completely familiar with the roast format. So
I'm not sure we did the roast format if we're going to be pedantic about it, but
let's be pedantic.
I mean, I don't know how you grew up, but in my day, there was this thing that was more formal with the focus on the roastee, I guess.
The focus on the roastee. Okay.
And we just had this like sprinkling of whatever banter on top of the other stuff.
Fair enough. Yeah. No, that's true.
It's a good time.
So we're like not laying it on thick, but we're laying it's like a little mousse.
Well, there was a lot to do because we had to do the Deming days and the DevOps days and roast John Willis.
Yeah. This makes sense.
So we make it do.
Okay. Have you been to other DevOps days that were roast enabled?
This is a first.
This is a first. Okay.
Although I'm constantly roasting people.
They don't realize it when they walk into the room.
Oh, I think they do, but
that's the vibe that you bring.
I don't know. I think you gotta have fun. So.
Yeah. Okay. So DevOps differentiator, gotta have fun.
Or what else are you doing?
Yeah.
I mean that's a Deming thing too.
Yeah. Is it?
He makes many quotes. There's a lot of stuff about how management has sucked the fun out of the work, and that people only will have high quality work if they enjoy their work.
Okay. It's important.
I love me some Deming, by the way, if you didn't realize that. If you're not a Deming aficionado, I didn't do the actual calculation, but I'm relatively certain I average over one Deming quote per DevOps Days presentation. Go back to the beginning.
Oh my God. That's incredible.
Now you have that.
Yeah. Very good. Yeah. I mean, I should have mentioned too, we are often calling this Deming Days. And John Willis has even replaced his photo with John Deming.
That he did that like 10 years ago.
Oh, well, geez.
He's had the Edward Deming photo for a long time, and he wrote a book about Deming too. But
okay. So all Deming all the time from the beginning. We're just happening to lean into it.
I think part of the point I was trying to make today is all this stuff's timeless. So you can find all these Deming quotes. And then, like he invented this thing, or here's this cycle, plan, do, check, act, or plan, do, study, act, or plan, do, study, adjust. Like everyone's got to have some little different thing to fight about in detail.
Yeah.
But one of the points I made in my talk is you can find quotes all through history. And I made a quote that sounds like Deming would say it, but it's actually from Aristotle. So that's a good 2,500 years ago.
Nice. Okay, so now you're pandering fake news is what you're telling me.
I mean, there's very, very few things that are unchained, right? Yeah. We build on the shoulders of giants.
For sure. You just gave your talk.
This morning,
Amazing.
About an hour and a half ago.
How did it go?
I don't know. I was amused. I'm not sure I'm the best judge, but the chef prepared the omakase for the consumption of the audience.
And what was your talk about?
I've made a lot of Deming references. There's a few points. So there's this thing called, the title of the talk was Plan, Do, Study, Act.
Okay.
Which is sometimes referred to as the Deming cycle. But if you go down that rabbit hole, you'll realize before that, it was really called the Short cycle. There's this other guy that influenced Deming, yada, yada, yada. And in the middle of this, I show that there's a papyrus from Egypt talking about medicine, which has something that looks suspiciously like the same cycle for diagnosing and treating diseases.
Oh my goodness.
From that's 1600 BC. So
wow.
we keep thinking we're smart, but it's like people were smart before.
Yeah.
So there's this looping construct about how you have some model, you're making actions based on what you think your strategy, what game you're trying to win, and then you're making measurements and you're going through this cycle. So that's the cycle there, but it's the same cycle. We could make a list of 25 different looping cycles from different disciplines, and it's literally all the same.
Yeah.
Going back and like science is science. Let's do this. So that's one point. What I'm trying to get people to realize is you're only going to get better if your model gets better, but you're not really learning. I made this point a lot in my illustrious DevOps career.
Oh yeah.
Organizational learning is not about getting new vocabulary. It's about expressing new behaviors. So when you're talking about whatever buzzword you want to pick and what it really means, it's not the new vocabulary, it's the new behavior. So if you just adopted the titles, if you changed all your titles to DevOps,
right,
just to do nothing different and wait until you could change your titles to SRE and then do nothing different, and then now change your titles to platform engineering and do nothing different, then you probably won't have great outcomes. You get the DevOps you deserve. That's how I usually tell people.
Yes, yes. I'm so glad that we brought up platform engineering and SREs because it seems to be the point of contention that comes up all the time. So where do we sit with this tripartite diffusion of the field?
I mean, one of our favorite hobbies in this industry is arguing over the definitions of made-up words. And one of the quotes that I had in my talk is the narcissism of small differences,
yes,
which is, it's from Freud. It basically says that the more commonalities there are between adjacent groups, the more likely they are to ridicule each other and find ways to point out the differences instead of how it's 99% the same thing. So between the SRE and DevOps differences, I think, 2016 called and wants its arguments back because that was resolved a long time ago. And then, platform engineering, I haven't seen a single novelty introduced into the conversation, but it is sometimes useful to have a new report from the analyst that has a new buzzword so that you can justify a new initiative and a new budget to try to change the things that you didn't change last time.
Yeah. Well, I speak for all analysts when I say you're welcome.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We need that.
Yeah, you sure do. Okay.
But you're doing it right when you have a silo for DevOps and a silo for SRE and a new silo for platform engineering in the same organization, and they don't work together.
Beautiful.
That's where it's at.
Button heads.
No, not necessarily, but everyone wants to rule the world. And once the DevOps initiative lost steam because we didn't change anything, then we needed a new word to not change anything.
Yeah. Well, you say anything, but as someone who's studied the difference between front-end engineers and full-stack engineers, it's $20,000 is the difference.
Oh yeah, I mean we had this conversation the other day, and I was talking to someone else about this nuance, and it's like, well, did you get a raise? High five.
That's not nothing, Andrew.
Well, no, you're right. Platform engineering all the way, baby. Let's go.
Okay, so we talked about the roast. We've talked about DevOps Days writ large. We've talked about your talk. You want to pitch us on anything? What's next? What's new?
I got so many things.
Hit me.
I mean, right now, I feel that everything is being reconfigured.
Okay.
And we didn't really talk about AI or vibe coding or what's going to change or what's already changed about some of these processes. But I feel like every assumption about software is being revisited or should be in the, and I spent a lot of time, and in fact, I introduced this terminology in my talk today, talking about socio-technical systems, which is a term that was coined in the 1950s studying the mechanization of coal mines. And it has a lot of parallels to what we see with the adoption of tools in DevOps. And it's definitely going to have an implication in the way people adopt AI. But the fundamental theorem of socio-technical systems is that you can't treat the socio and the technical as separate systems, that they're an interdependent single system.
Got it.
So that's interesting. But the presumption until now is that agency really only existed on the socio system. Mm-hmm. And now we're entering a phase where you're going to have agency on the technical side.
Wow.
And I mean, I think it's interesting and exciting to think about how that adds to the complexity of this. But if you're not tracking the daily changes of what's happening with these tools and what's possible, and you're still in the time capsule circa 2023 or whatever, then you're gonna be in for a rude awakening when the rest. It's just going to be such a competitive advantage for those who step into the stream. At least I'm convinced. I do also think there's going to be a bit of a reconciliation of the valuations against the value created, but there's definitely fire behind the smoke.
All right. Well, it has been amazing catching up with you, Andrew. If folks want to continue this conversation or follow more of your deep thoughts on all things DevOps and adjacent categories, what's the best channel for them to do that?
I'm terrible at self-promotion, and I have been particularly terrible at being active on the socials. Yep. I need to really relearn how to feed the algorithms, if you will.
Indeed.
So I'm not sure there's a great way to follow me because I'm mostly quiet and working on things until someone summons me from my cave to the DevOps days, if you will.
All right.
But if you hit me up on LinkedIn, make a note about what you heard or why you think it'd be interesting to talk, and I'd love to continue any conversation.
All right. Thanks for coming on the pod, Andrew.
Let's go. RedMonk. Oh, yeah. I told you this before. Long time ago, ancient history, Puppet, $5,000. The best money ever spent on RedMonk.
Oh, I love that. All right.
ROI.
Hey.
Let's go.
Yeah. Thanks.
Thank you.
Hello and welcome to DevOps Days Atlanta 2025. I'm recording the MonkCast here live from the lovely Academy of Medicine and talking to a lot of guests here, a lot of speakers, and I am excited to say that I have got John Willis here to talk to me a little bit about his experiences at the conference. Now, you've been to a number of DevOps Days over the years. Can we say that you've attended them all?
No, not all of them, but I will say I think I still probably hold the record for attending the most DevOps days of any one person.
Oh my gosh. Okay. Yeah. I had Andrew Clay Shafer on earlier, and do you think that he would want to arm wrestle for the title of who's been?
No, I've been way more than he has. Yeah, he's been to a lot, but as anybody should know, I am a huge fan, and he's been an incredible mentor to me. So I love Andrew Clay Shafer, but I've been to more DevOps days than he has.
All right. Fair enough. Gauntlet thrown. So talk to me about your experience being roasted, because you are the guest of honor.
Yeah.
Have you been roasted before?
I have never been roasted before, and I hopefully never will be roasted again. No, I don't know. So we had I just a short little, I was the only American at the first DevOps days in Ghent. So the original Patrick DeBar. And I had the idea to come back and see if we couldn't create one in the U.S. And so I actually, with Andrew and a good friend of mine, Damon Edwards, and a couple other people, we literally ran the first DevOps days in Silicon Valley. Wow. And then for the first couple of years, we ran like all the ones in the U.S. And so So anyways, we had a 15-year anniversary of the first discussion of DevOps in Antwerp last summer. And so all the organizers, we had a pre-organizer day.
Yeah.
And there was a lot of discussions about, like, should we call it DevOps? I mean, the economies of conferences post-pandemic has been very difficult, right?
Sure.
And then so the communities pre-pandemic of DevOps days were just flourishing, really big venues. In fact, the last time they ran one in Atlanta, it was, I think, was at the aquarium, right? So like this place is beautiful, the Academy of Science and Medicine, but like we've gotten to the point where you could run it at the aquarium, right? And now the economics of this stuff is it's tough to run the DevOps days, right? So on 15-year anniversary, we were sort of having a conversation, and I haven't been as active as I used to be a core organizer, but I sort of now I'm the old advisor, like, John, what do you think, And being the person who's been to the most of them, and I've seen every angle of every problem that's come over the 15 years. So anyway, the discussion was, should we rename it? Gene Kim renamed the DevOps Enterprise Summit,
Okay.
right, to ETLS, the Enterprise Technology Leadership Summit, right? So there's been this like debate, and it was an active debate of the organizers pre-meetup about how we name it. And Chris Corian was like just a brilliant, like crazy guy, and he's like, if we're gonna do something crazy, let's do something crazy.
Yeah.
And he came and he just announced in front of the whole group that I want to run a roast of John Willis, a Deming day, and I'm the Deming person, right? I wrote my book about Dr. Deming, and I was like, man, you're crazy, dude. That's like, it's a terrible idea, like, and in retrospect, like, not for my own ego, it's actually turned out to be a cool idea because he's like that crazy. He's like Dolly says, there's sort of a special type of crazy. I forget what his favorite quote is. Dolly has a great quote about, about being crazy, but that he's really actually, there's some brilliance in his craziness,
Yeah.
right? And there actually was some, I think, brilliance in Chris's, not for the ego, but because we needed to shake something up. Nobody could agree on actually renaming it because nobody wants to take that sword of like you're going to run the first DevOps days. That isn't called DevOps days.
Right.
And so this idea of sort of creating a fun Deming, DevOps, and AI, or John Willis roast, was sounded insane, but like he pulled it off. He had sponsors. We had a good turnout, and so back to like me, I was like, okay, like that. You want to do that? That's fine. And I figured, I better find some people I know really like me. Like, let me prefab this thing, right? Like I didn't want him just pulling out somebody who's like, yeah, that Willis guy, he shows up everywhere, so I was like, Chris, if we're going to do this, do you mind asking this Andrew? Like, do you mind asking this guy? And so I kind of built a couple of guardrails there, I guess. But yeah, it was, I literally, as we got closer, I was like, like, there's a lot of there's some interesting things you could say about my career. I've never lied to anybody. I don't think there's anybody on this planet that can actually stand up and legitimately say I screwed them over.
Okay.
I'll go to my grave with that one. But probably think a lot of people think I'm just incredibly lucky, right? Like, and I am, right? Like, I've sold a startup that was like less than 3 months old to Docker.
Oh, wow.
Right. And people are like, what did he do? He must have, like, even you've probably heard some of the jokes about, like Patrick was saying, he seems to sell really good. Yeah. And I do. But like, there's a lot of, like, it's not as simple. It looks like that I built a company that's 3 months old and sold to Docker. On a face value, that looks like it had to be all zoot suit stuff.
Uh-huh.
But I went in business to two guys who were literally, the first guy did the first commit on Open Daylight, which was the Nicira killer, who'd been working on that for 2 years at Red Hat on the CTO team.
Wow.
So we had, like, day one, we had 2.5 years of open source IP that he was the top first committer and top committer on this project. So it wasn't a 3-month-old company. But all right, so again, the fact that I got to know these guys, the fact that I understood enough to help them build a business.
Sure. But
my career does look like I do a little bit of work and have a lot of success. So anyway, I'm like over rotating now, but like, it scared me to think that somebody who didn't know me could come in and make these observations, and that would probably sting and hurt. So I did prefab it. It was a lot of love. Michael from Piano. I'll do a shout out to Piano. He did the true, like, he really made fun of me, called me short, talked about how I dress, made fun about me, like, even like the stingy one was like, I had to take fashion advice from John Willis, and then he said he probably has his breakfast stains on his shirt, and he's probably right, So all right, so it was good. It was all love, and it was great. So.
Yeah. Andrew and I were speaking about how it's not a traditional roast in the sense that everyone's kind of sprinkling it.
Sure. Yeah.
But I would say that yes, the one that you're referring to, Michael's, was that
was a real roast. That was that was good.
That was amazing. Yes, I know. I feel like certain folks have a flair for that type of.
He could have a different second career there going. Yeah, he was pretty good at it.
Yes, I was very impressed, and it's all in good fun. I like to think this is a
well, as long as it was with love. I don't mind. Like it's like feels great to be made fun of by somebody who loves you, right?
Yeah.
That's I'll take that all day long. So honestly, because you know where it comes from, and then like that is. The people who love you should be the most critical of you.
Sure.
Right. So it was all good, but
fantastic.
But I'd love to talk a little about my book.
I would love to hear about your book. Let's hear it.
Yeah. So I've done a number of books over the years. I wrote the DevOps Handbook. I co-wrote the DevOps Handbook. I also did a project with Gene Kim called Beyond the Phoenix Project, which was an audio only book. And then during the pandemic, I sat down and wrote a book about one of my favorite characters, Dr. Edward Deming. It was called Deming's Journey to Profound Knowledge. And it's been out for a little over 2 years. And so I finished it almost 3 years ago, by the time you finish it, and it sort of goes through poetry. So I had this notion of, my Deming book was very much, I like to sort of think about how a subject set, if Michael Lewis was going to write the book, how would he write it? Because I love the way he tells, like the Moneyball, the Flash Boys, or Blindside. They're all great, very technical, but anybody can read them.
Right.
And so I did that with my Deming book. It was sort of anybody could read it. And I have two target readers. I have a subject matter expert and my mother-in-law, who's a high IQ reader, but she knows nothing about technology.
Yeah.
So I started thinking about it. I've been working very hard in the last 3 or 4 years on AI, generative AI models, helping organizations architecture, scale, security, all the things that you do, that I do. I'm an infrastructure and operations person pretty much. And then I really started wondering about the history. So I just started doing a lot of digging on the history. And it turns out when you go looking for history, when you look from the history angle, not the technical, not the Turing did this and here's how the Turing test works. When you go look for the story of Turing, or you look at every one of these characters were just glorious. Yeah. They had incredible accomplishments. Some of them you've never heard of who's changed your life. But they all have these brilliant, the fact that they were brilliant in one thing means they were like iconically crazy in other things. And so along the way, I started compiling all these stories of sort of last 75 to in some cases 200 years, but mostly about 75 years of what led us to the ChatGPT moment. Okay. So the idea was ChatGPT wasn't it just didn't miraculously happen in 2022. I mean, it actually started in 1943 with a paper about the mathematical calculus of how the brain might work, which was really the first paper on neural networks. Huh. And then there's just the glorious path of all these people that have these amazing, stories and politics, and this one trying to sort of steal the thunder from that one. So you get sort of a nice, fun arc. And a friend of mine had mentioned, I couldn't really come up with a name, and he said, sounds like all your characters, or all these characters in the history of AI, are rebels. And that they're always told, oh, don't do that, it'll never work. But they defiantly say they don't, they don't fall for dogma. They have this sort of vision for something that has to be there. All these characteristics are so common in every one of them. And I was like, they are rebels. And I was sort of fumbling around the idea, what is the sub-theme is the human's quest for thinking machines. Okay. And that's really been what's been going on here. Everybody's been trying to think, can I create a computational implementation of a sort of reasoning or thinking machine? And so it sort of hit me in a flash, this idea of rebels of reason. Like this is all about been reasoning, right? From like, back to, Babbage's analytical machine to Ada Lovelace's translation of it, all the way to, sort of Turing to these two gentlemen that are crazy story people, McCullough and Pitts, or like Jack Kerouac characters of math and psychology. Like it's just, and like you go all the way through the arc of like, Dennis Hassabis is he's the guy who found the deep mind. Now it's part of Google's deep mind. But I mean, at 4 years old, he beats his dad in chess. At like 13, he's a chess master. At like 15, he's sitting in a tournament and realizing how much wasted time is on chess that could go for curing cancer. Last year, he wins the Nobel Prize for protein folding. Wow. And like literally that is the road to curing cancer.
Oh, wow.
Like, and that is in the best story in the book.
Oh my God.
Yeah. So.
That sounds incredible. And what is the name of this book?
Rebels of Reason.
Rebels of Reason. Yeah. Okay, great.
So so that's been like a lot of fun. And then my day job is literally learning how to do like deep architecture for large corporations to implement, sort of not just LLMs, but gateways and architectures for how to scale it, how to make sure it's secure, how to guardrail it, how to run sort of what they call evaluations and ground truth to make sure you're getting the possible best answers that you can get for, what we would call, safety critical or high consequence services and applications. Yeah.
Wow.
Fun stuff. It's a good time to be alive.
I'm telling you, I know. And you've been busy. Okay. Amazing. And how many books have you published at this point?
So there's if I did a list, this is my 13th book, right? That should be lucky now. Yeah, maybe. Yeah. Nice. But I will say, so like the first 7 books were a lot of sort of project oriented. Like there was something back in the day called IBM Red Books. Okay. And I used to get involved in these projects and to be multi-authors. So, but I count them as books. They're books. They're out there. They got ISBN numbers, so you can look them up. Yeah. But then my sort of first real, I wouldn't say they're not real books, but sort of the first real book. Like you'd be hard pressed to find one of those books on Amazon. Yeah. You might find them, but you'd probably find them in IBM catalog somewhere. Sure. But my first sort of book it was like the first real book was a home run, which was the DevOps Handbook. Yeah. And then that was, we worked Gene Kim, Just Humble, Patrick DeWatt, and myself. And so that was a stake in the ground book. And today it's still relative, right? It is sort of still, I think, would be considered the canonical book for DevOps, right? Mm-hmm. And then I did a side project with Gene called Beyond the Phoenix Project. I told it was an audio book. And then I started thinking about this Deming story, Dr. Deming, and I had been working on that for 10 years. Huh. And then in the pandemic, I finally decided, I'm going to do it. Like first, like either do it or shut up about it, and that's the hardest part about people want to write books, right? You have this idea and you just like, there's a point at which you're like, you got to say to yourself, am I really going to do this? Like, cause I mean, I gotta shut up about it at this point. Yeah. And if sitting in the pandemic, and I think in the forward of my Deming book, I said something, I got back like 40 hours a month. There's no travel, right? Like if you add up all the time it took to get to the airport, on the plane, all that stuff, I was given this gift of about 40 hours a month of extra time. Sure. And I said, like, if I'm not going to use that time to write a book, then like I really need to stop saying I'm going to write this book. And I sat down, I hired a consultant. Now he's my business partner. And then now I'm on the road. Like, so I've just finished this Rebels of Reason, the history of AI. And I'm starting to play around with like, what's my next subject? So I'm probably going to write a book every year for the rest of my life. I mean, I love it. It's a great process. I built a process working with my business partner now that we're even going to try to turn that process over to other people in sort of a like cliche, but AI mode of like helping you make, so the idea is I meet so many people that wrote a book and they're like, I'll never do that again. Yeah. I'll never stop doing it. Right. And it depends on the approach that you use to create a book. And it makes a difference on the approach. Yeah. I love writing books. It's research. It's like, I mean, it's if I ever get to a point where if I kind of quasi retire, that will be it. But like, I would love the day where I'm just all my income is based on my books. Yeah. So that's all I would do then. Go around, talk about my books, have discussions like this and write books. And research. The beauty thing about books is research. Yeah. The research is the the beautiful. You pick a subject, and I don't I've got a couple of interesting ideas for my next subject, right? And the thing that where the light, you go with the flashlight.
Mm-hmm.
And once you saw, I've got, okay, there's Joseph Duran is an interesting character that. But what I have to do next is I got to put the flashlight all around him. And if I can see these tentacles of brilliant side stories, then I know it's the right book.
Huh.
Right? So it's not just the person. I think Michael Lewis does this. I think someday I'm going to meet him and say, I have all my books. You got to read these because these are all you are my hero. Right. But I think that's the thing. All the subjects he can pick. I think when he writes this book, I don't think it's just happenstance that you get all these great stories.
Yeah.
I think you have to do you have to have some sort of mental test to look around the edges of the character or the story that you want to tell to say, how interesting are all the side stories going to be? Because that's what makes a great Michael Lewis book.
Right.
It's not, Moneyball, I don't get to get geeky. Moneyball could have been about the general manager, a guy named Billy Beane. And it could have been a biography of Billy Beane. And that would have been a boring as hell book.
Yeah.
But the story around what happened and the economics of baseball and the stats and the analytics and all that stuff, that was the flashlight of why it wasn't just a Billy Beane biography,
Right.
So yeah.
Huh. So I'm interested. I've published 2 academic books at this point, and so I've dipped my toe in. I'm not near 13. But I think a thing that I'm questioning is the value of books in the age of AI, and I guess maybe more just when you're writing a technical book, the turnaround is so slow with writing books. Would it make more sense for us to write blog posts? You're doing history. I write history. I get that a lot of the folks we write about are dead,
Yeah, we do. Yeah, we do.
But you're writing about AI, and
Yeah.
AI is changing.
Well, but again, I knock on glass. I think I'm isolated. I think it's the same thing with startups right now. I've done 12 startups, right?
Yeah.
Right now I wouldn't do a startup unless I had an incredible niche. If I thought there was an angle, and so there are some startups that have this niche side. They're staying away from all the fire.
Right.
And that's a good idea right now. And by the way, though, as soon as it's exposed, 2 people in a garage are going to basically replicate it. You literally have the Star Trek, the Star Trek thing where you want to take your vacation and it just made this whole
holodeck.
Yeah, holodeck, right? Yeah. We are really close to holodecking any idea or any story.
Yeah.
All right. So it's the same thing with the technical book. I hate to say this, but one of my best friends wrote a book about vibe coding.
Okay.
I've seen 5 now, the 5th book in the last 2 weeks.
Yeah.
That's being published on vibe coding.
Wow.
And by the way, I don't think any of them are going to be. Disrespect to. I know how hard it is to write a book.
Right.
And to your point, in 6 months or at least a year, they're all going to be irrelevant.
Right.
So any technical book, just like a startup, is it is dangerous ground. Mm-hmm. Now, the reason, okay, so now I've said this, and now I'm going to defend my book. But my book is about the history of AI.
Yes.
Right? Nothing is going to change about, McCullough and Pitts creating a paper about the first way they use Boolean calculus to describe the brain.
Yeah, sure.
That ain't going to change. And then going all the way through Turing and all that stuff. And by the way, my book, my book ends?
No.
You don't, of course
I
not.
don't.
It ends before the debate of the argument between Google and OpenAI and the character that literally there's a Elon Musk versus what's his face?
Sam Altman.
It was Elon Musk originally who was the primary investor of OpenAI, right, who was battling with the Sergey whatever Brin or whatever from Google for this guy named, and I always pronounce his name, Ilya Susskind, that was the guy, and they were going back and forth. And it was this unbelievable drama story of who was going to win, because this guy's a genius, and he became the first CTO of OpenAI, and OpenAI won, and Musk won. Yeah, that's where I end the story. So I don't even I'm not telling you anything. Even I don't even tell you other than what happened with ChatGPT and how the numbers are phenomenal. But then I sort of end the history of AI at that debate of who was going to get that guy. Yeah. Right. So I am, again, knock on glass, pretty isolated about that story's not changing. And unless somebody else comes around and writes a better version, which right now I don't know anybody who's written a full end to end that can, tie all the dots together of, like a ton of people talk about Turing, ton of people talk about McCullough, less people talk about McCullough Pitts. Everybody talks about Hinton, but like, I can draw you a narrative of like I put it this way. I read 23 books on the history of AI. None of them mention Grace Hopper.
Wow.
Right. And because like on face value, she's not part of the AI story.
Okay.
But you don't have NLP if she doesn't create the first compiler.
Right.
And the first compiler is the first instantiation of trying to take natural language to turn it into bits and bytes.
Yeah, sure.
So she deserves a seat at the table in the history of AI, and she's in my book.
Yeah.
And I'm a big fan of diversity. When I say that, I'm the fat old white guy, but I probably have more stories. I've got Ada Lovelace. I bet you nobody knows that Janet Baker was the woman who basically was the genesis of Siri.
Wow.
Who's Ada Lovelace in her AI history book? Fei Li, some people know how important she is. I've got a whole chapter on Fei Li.
Yeah.
Without Fei Li, we don't have ChatGPT. And nobody calls her the godfather of AI. All right. So I think I did an incredible job on diversity. I think I've done, anyway, I think I'm fair, but your point is well taken. And what I worry about now, or I think about is none of my books, there's not one text in any of my books that has been written by AI. I don't know. Somebody asked me that yesterday. I think there's an opportunity to write a book about AI.
Yeah.
Now, going back to your core question, I hope that great, I'm going to sort of lowercase g with the word great, or because I'm not a great writer, maybe I can someday be considered somebody who's more than lowercase, closer to uppercase g, great. But
you're modest too.
All right, but here's the point though. I am very creative.
Okay.
And what I hope that never happens, I mean, if in some future version of a book where I use AI to help me build this section, but I Lego piece a great story.
Yeah.
I got my fingers crossed that a day where AI can create a better book about Deming than my book about Deming. Mm-hmm. That's sort of doomsday.
Okay.
And that's probably going to happen. I hope it happens way longer than later. I think the people that I love to read, like Michael Lewis, our favorite authors, I think we've got some timeline and a runway where their ability to piece together a creative story is got to be better than something than hitting a button and say, ChatGPT, give me a great story about Dr. Deming.
Yeah.
So, but the answer is I don't know. And I can't guarantee you that I won't write a future book about that isn't completely like where I Legoed together my version of a story about some history story.
Yeah. Well, John, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. I'm going to wrap it up here. But this is super interesting. So maybe I'll have you come on for a full episode.
Yeah, that'd be awesome. Yeah,
dig into it.
And tell those knuckleheads to invite me to MonkCast. Or I've never been invited there. Tell James and those guys. All you gotta do is ask.
That's funny. Yes.
All you gotta do is ask. Yeah, Oktoberfest. Yeah. All you gotta do is ask, guys.
Oh, funny. All right. For the record, amazing. Okay, so if folks want to follow your next new project, what's the best social media?
Yeah, I'm on Amazon. I mean, so I've got a book portal out there. It's pretty easy. John Willis. There might be some other John Willises, but you'll quickly see that the one that has at least 5 books on the portal, and so Deming's Journey to Profound Knowledge, Rebels of Reason, which should be June 5th, is the projected date to show up that you can order. I may have an early order page up on Amazon. Before then, I'm called Botchagaloop. I don't know if you put it in the show notes, but that's the best way to find me. Botchagaloop at Gmail is my email. But if you do John Willis DevOps or Botchagaloop, if you can spell it, I'm pretty easy to find on LinkedIn. So
fantastic. Thanks so much for coming on.
Sure, it was great. Thank you. All right.
All right. right. I am here with Katie Anderson at DevOps Days Atlanta. We are recording live in the library. Super excited to talk to Katie about her book and her talk here. So is this your first DevOps Days?
This is my very first DevOps Days.
Amazing.
I was invited by John Willis to help roast him because John and I got to know each other a few years ago when he was in Japan with me.
I love that so much. I love the idea of attending something with the benefit of participating in a roast of someone you admire.
Yes, it was. I immediately said yes. It was amazing that my calendar was cleared, and it's been such an incredible event and so many really fabulous conversations. Great to meet you and so many other people here. We've just dived so deep into how do we create cultures of learning? It doesn't matter what our industry is. It's really about how do we foster learning and focus on people. And it's just been really exciting to have those conversations here.
And so before we go any further, how do you typically introduce yourself at these things? I mean, you're obviously a passionate speaker, and I've been already talked with Kanesha earlier about how wonderful your talk was. But
thank you. Well, I'm Katie Anderson. I like to consider myself a learning enthusiast. I'm a leadership consultant and an author of a book, Learning to Lead, Leading to Learn. And I work with organizations to help bring the behaviors and mindset that leaders need to really foster innovation in learning and focus on people first.
Fantastic. Okay. Love that. Yes, as a former academic, anytime we talk about learning, I get very excited.
Yes,
It's something that I feel passionate about.
I started off my career in academia as well. So that's really like my passion for learning and research and bringing concepts together really started from those early days in my career. And it's now just transitioned into helping organizations do the same thing.
Yeah. I'd love to hear more about what that looks like, because you've mentioned it a couple of times. And so, what is that? Yeah. What's that process like?
In terms of what?
When you go into a company, like how do you help them to improve their learning culture? Like try to, I just update the ways that they think through it. You spoke a little bit about Toyota and how they encourage not blaming folks and trying to consistently upskill the team. But I'm interested in how you extend that.
Yeah. So 20 years ago, when I made the transition from academia and academic research to working in organizations, I got so excited about how do we harness people's problem solving and input at all levels of organization. And so when I work with organizations and executives and their leaders now, it's really about helping create the conditions for them to have some aha moments about what's going on in their organization now and how do their leadership behaviors contribute to the outcomes that they're seeing. And so one of the things, or a few of the things I hear all the time is we're so busy. We're putting out fires all the time. We're running around. We don't have time to be leaders as coaches. We just got to get stuff done. Yeah. And I'm able to help give them the space for some reflection and seeing that by just doing, they're actually not using the people's capabilities in the best way. And actually, when we can slow down and really understand what problem we need to solve or where, the destination we need to go to, we can be more effective in the doing. Because we're actually having it be aligned and thinking and solving problems along the way. And I think most leaders have this greater purpose of being a good human being and doing good things for the world, or helping their people, help their people grow in capability. But again, it just feels like this time pressure, and so it's sort of this trap that we get into. That if we can just break that cycle just a little bit, actually so much more happens. And it's small, simple changes. Like I talked yesterday about break the telling habit. Yeah. How do we ask more questions and not just tell? How do we just pause and just reflect a little bit more? And just small things just build into greater impact.
I love that. And so you've written a book.
Yes.
Talk to us about your recent book.
Yeah, actually I have it here. Learning to Lead, Leading to Learn, Lessons from Toyota Leader Isao Yoshino on a Lifetime of Continuous Learning. And again, the lifetime of continuous learning, because as I learned when I lived in Japan, I moved there in 2015 for 2 years and was so excited as a continuous improvement practitioner and consultant about to go to the birthplace of the Toyota production system. And so I was speaking with this 40-year Toyota leader, and I was so curious on what's the secret to Toyota's success. I mean, everything that we know is lean manufacturing, agile, DevOps has its origins in the Toyota way. Mm-hmm. And he kept saying there is no secret. And one day he said, the only secret to Toyota is its attitude towards learning. And so that was the genesis of, it just enriched my understanding, and really all the tools and all the practices, again, agnostic of what industry we're in, goes about how can we really create this learning culture. And, our conversations, I started writing a blog 10 years ago, then became this passion of mine. I needed to share the knowledge that I was gaining from this incredible human being and the history of Toyota with the world. And so it became I was leveraging my qualitative research experience from academia, became this 2-year research project of deep interviews with him, and then consolidating it into a story-driven history and lesson about how do we learn to lead, and then how do we lead with an attitude towards learning.
That's phenomenal. Okay. And so your talk yesterday got into that a little bit. And I was very interested in the story around the painting the cars. It didn't go well. Would you mind sharing that?
Certainly. So this was one of the when Mr. Yoshino and I sat down for purposeful interviews, we went back to the beginning. And one of the very first stories or experiences he reflected on was one he hadn't thought of for decades. And it's the story I shared yesterday about how when he was a new hire in 1966 at Toyota, 22 years old, coming out of college, for the first and foremost, Toyota had a 4-month orientation program, which is like a true investment in people's learning. Yeah. And the point of it was to both learn the value creation work of the organization as well as the company culture. And he was working a back office job, but he was assigned to the front line. And his one simple job for a few months was to pour a can of paint and a can of solvent into a big vat. And as the cars came down the road, the line to spray them. And one day the shop floor manager ran in and said, "Stop the line. The cars are like literally the paint's not sticking to them, like dripping down the side of the cars." And all eyes went on him. And I tell the story all the time on stage because what would happen to you, in your first job, if you made a huge mistake,
they would have fired me, I assume.
Fired me, or certainly yelled at you, blamed at you, been angry. And that is not what happened. They paused and they came over calmly and asked, what was the process that you took to mix the paint and the solvent together? And he was super nervous. He's 22, his new job. And so they focused on process, not blaming the person. And what a powerful story. But then something even more incredible. And he was laughing at this thinking, and he's like, "Can you believe this?" He said, "Not only they asked me about the process and not blame me, they then said, 'Thank you. Thank you for making this mistake, because you showed that we as the managers hadn't set up the working conditions for you to be successful.'" And wow, it's mic drop, right? And that was happening consistently for all of his other fellow new hires. When they made a mistake and, if they were, working in the car and didn't tighten the bolt the right way, they saw the mistake as an opportunity for learning and saw it as their responsibility to ensure that the working conditions were set up for people not to be able to make mistakes. And when they do, to create the learning conditions around it. Wow. I mean, that is the essence. And so it doesn't matter all the tools that we can be putting in, all the maps and everything. Yeah. If we don't fundamentally have this acceptance in the embracing of mistakes as a source of learning, and the concept of, Mr. Yoshino always says, no problem is a problem, then we're not going to be successful in any of the tool application.
Yeah, that's phenomenal. And so a lot of these lessons, apply to Lean, they apply to DevOps. Can you talk at all about, again, we're roasting John Willis here. Yes. What is the intersection between what DevOps is doing, what sort of message John and the other folks at the Phoenix Project, et cetera, are bringing to your own learning?
Well, so it all comes back to, again, how do we look at systems and how do we have a learning mindset? Okay. So John's and my paths overlapped because of his passion and interest in W. Edwards Deming and Deming's influence on Japanese management and culture. And he got excited through a client of mine, Glenn Wilson, who had participated in some of my programs during the pandemic, who had already signed on to join one of my Japan leadership experiences, an immersive week in Japan. And Glenn said, "John, you should come too." And so John joined me on that. And what we discovered through many, both in that time in Japan, and John and I have continued to stay connected because of the passion around Deming and learning, I've really come to see, and I hadn't really been exposed to DevOps before that. I, came from a healthcare background and worked with a lot of manufacturing, biotech, government. But again, regardless of the process that we're working in or the industry, the principles are all fundamentally the same. And I've heard that throughout the whole of the last 2 days here. It's about how do we know what problem we need to solve? What's the value we need to create for our customers? How do we collaborate across our organization to do that? And how do we have a learning mindset to iterate our way towards that outcome that we need? And so, if you strip away the language, it all comes back to the same principles, and you could be talking about anything. So that's why it's also been such a fabulous time to be here, because we're all really trying to do the same thing.
Wow. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And you've brought a little toy with you today, so I'd love to hear about what this is.
So these are, I'm obsessed with these Japanese figures called Daruma dolls. And I now import thousands of them. Every time I'm going back to Japan, and I bring back hundreds every trip.
Oh my gosh.
And I have some huge ones. Well, they're paper mache dolls that represent the Bodhidharma. And he actually lost his feet because he sat in Zen meditation for so long. So it's just a head. And they're like little weeble wobbles, where literally if you knock them over, they right themselves back up. They're weighted at the bottom. And they represent the Japanese proverb, fall down 7 times, get up 8. And it's when you have a goal, you fill in the doll's left eye, you give it a pupil. And it's a visual reminder for you of your goal, and that also the path towards achieving your goal is going to have setbacks and stumbles, and you're going to fall down. But what's important is about getting yourself back up and learning your way forward. And when you achieve your goal, you can fill in the doll's right eye. So I became obsessed with them. When I lived in Japan in 2015, my kids were in preschool, and they had a bunch of these. I said, what are these? And then I've become obsessed. I actually take people to the Daruma temple in Japan, where they're like stacked up. Japanese companies bring them for good luck, and then they have a big bonfire at the end of the year. But it's really, really special. It's about that patience, the perseverance, and the knowing that there's stumbles and struggle along the way. And that's inherent to the learning process, or inherent to us achieving goals that we want.
Wow. That is so important. And I love the idea that it's something you can interact with, and that it becomes a part of your goal culture, right?
Yes.
Like, hey, I'm going to write a book. I'm going to start with the one eye. And then when I finish it, I'm going to remind myself throughout that it's not going to be easy. There's going to be hiccups, but, eventually I'm going to fill in that last eye.
Yes. So this one's for you.
Oh, well, thank you so much. I appreciate that. All right. Well, so we are wrapping up here. You have your own podcast.
I do.
Talk to me about that.
It's called Chain of Learning. And this came from a comment that Mr. Yoshino made to me as well, is that he was so grateful to be part of a company that really believed in a chain of learning. And I've come to see a chain of learning. It's you and I here together, Kate. It's the people listening. We're all connected together as learners and leaders together. And it's that intersection that really creates the strength in our organizations and in our world. So go check out Chain of Learning. And I drop episodes every 2 weeks. So, and people can reach out to me at Katie. I'm Katie Anderson, and kbjanderson.com is my website, and I'm on LinkedIn as well.
All right. Thanks so much for coming.
Thanks, Kate. It's been great.